Welcome to Live in the Feast. I'm Jason Resnick, and for the past decade, I've been helping businesses translate their goals into online success as a freelance web developer. In order for me to accomplish my why as a freelancer, I needed to live in the feast. Now I'm turning the tables around so you, as the freelancer, can do the same and build a sustainable business to achieve success so that you can ultimately live the kind of life you want. Imagine if you walk into Best Buy and the sales rep comes up to you and says, "We have a TV that will automatically adjust for you when you're watching baseball and then again adjust when The Walking Dead is on." It'd be quite scary, right? Especially if you do watch baseball and The Walking Dead and somehow the sales rep knew that. Well, Brennan Dunn, early on in his career, figured out that people will pay for solutions to solve their business problems, not just code. And if that solution can be presented in the language of the customer, it makes for a much more easy sell for a lot more money. The takeaway from this episode is for you to look at your services page or your home page. Are you speaking the language of your clients, or are you speaking your language? Do you have techno-jargon on there? Do you speak to the benefits of your service or solution? You should be able to tell right away. If not, then tweet me at Rez and I'll take a look and give you a personalized video review. This episode is sponsored by Feast. Feast is the roadmap and community built for freelancers like you looking to take their business to the next level. You didn't become a freelancer and start your own business because you wanted to work more, right? Want better clients, command higher prices, build recurring revenue so you can stay out of the famine for good? Feast will help you focus and remain accountable through coaching calls, community, an exclusive mastermind group, and a ton of resources and tactics that work for today's market. Head over to rez.com/feast to check it out. And while you're there, take a look and grab the free lesson and the KPI spreadsheet, which I use to track my own content marketing. So let's dive in with Brennan and live in the feast. Howdy, folks, and welcome to Live in the Feast. And you know that this season is all about marketing. And when you're marketing yourself as a freelancer, you know that when you market to the right person at the right time, that's when they become a client. And today I'm really excited to be bringing to the show here someone whose name is synonymous with freelancing. And if you don't believe me, just Google it and you'll see it pop up all over the place, is Brennan Dunn. Welcome, Brennan.
Hey, what's up, Jason? Thanks for having me.
So for those that don't know who you are you and what do you do?
Sure. So quick overview is in a past life, I used to run a web development agency. So I did that starting in about 2008. Before that, I was freelancing. Then I grew to start an agency. And I built an agency. We did pretty well. We got to 11 employees. And I decided that I wanted to, at the time, get into the software game. So I started a company called PlanScope, which is a project management tool for freelancers and agencies. And on the riff of marketing, one thing that had to happen to get people to sign up for PlanScope was we needed to find a way of getting ourselves in front of people. So I started writing a lot about what I'd learned building an agency. And that took off. That actually became more successful than PlanScope ever did. I sold PlanScope in early 2016. And since then, I'd been full-time on what became Double Your Freelancing, which is just a big training website for all things freelancing. And then from that, my latest venture has been something called Write Message, which I founded earlier this year in 2017. And Write Message is a website personalization tool that allows you to tailor the content and copy on your website to speak directly to the person looking at it. Because that's something that, you help freelancers too. And there's a lot of different types of freelancers. There are designers and web developers and marketers and copywriters and all these different types of people who each of these types have different needs and they have different ways of describing these needs. I mean, for instance, a web developer might use the word rate, whereas a copywriter might use the word budget. It all means the same thing. It's a different way of saying, or fee, I should say, not budget. They might use the word fee. It's the same way of describing the same thing, which is the cost. But what I realized is the more that I could show somebody that I understand who they are and the language they use, and I could present testimonials and reviews and so on of people just like them. So the copywriter who shows up will know that I can also help her as a copywriter versus the alternative, which is showing, a lot of designers and developers and so on. So this is a technology that I started using on W Freelancing starting about 2-3 years ago, homegrown, built in-house to use on my own website. And then about a year ago, I created a course on marketing automation, and I included a lot of the code that I had used on W Freelancing and gave it away. But the biggest complaint people gave me was, this is all good and well, but I don't know what to do with a bunch of JavaScript. So I partnered up with Shai, who's my co-founder, and we set out to make this a proper company starting officially last April-ish or so.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're definitely going to dive into the personalization aspect of the marketing for sure. But before we do that, I just want to ask you, I mean, I know that you started a web agency, you did a lot of Ruby development and that kind of thing. As an engineer, go from university or college to a full-time job and that kind of thing. But ultimately, what was your why in starting your own business? Why did you go to that road?
Yeah. So for me, it's funny. So I actually dropped out of college to start a software business, a software startup called Agathon Solutions. And what we did there, which actually had its start for me in college, was and it's funny how things come full circle, but we actually built a company that generated leads for mortgage brokers. Because I was doing this on an individual basis while in college. And then I dropped out to make this an actual company. And it was interesting what we did. So a lot of mortgage brokers would get leads from websites like LendingTree, or one of these companies that will generate leads in bulk at scale, and then they'll resell the leads to multiple people. So what we did instead is we said, we'll employ the same tactics that LendingTree uses, namely nationwide advertising, where it's a little cheaper than, or it used to be at least, than localized advertising, broadcast-based marketing. And then what we would do is we'd make it so if somebody from Virginia clicked on an ad, we would on the fly find a customer of ours in Virginia, a mortgage broker customer, and we would choose one and show their branding, show their photo, show their information about their business with their our stock lead form. And then if a lead was generated from that visit, that would go directly to that customer of ours in real time. And we called it a branded lead. So instead of buying this person's name and phone number and they'd never heard of you, instead you're getting a name and a phone number, somebody who just seen your branding, your information. So it's funny, that was kind of like right. In a way what I'm doing now, just on a very less sophisticated scale. So I was doing that, and then the mortgage bubble burst, and that's when the whole subprime mortgage fallout thing happened in mid 2000s. And that led me to get a job in a rush because the company virtually went belly up overnight. And then I had to get a job. So I found an agency that was hiring PHP developers, which is what I was at the time. And I started working there and worked my way up the agency to effectively run the technology department of it. But it got me kind of insights into how an actual agency runs. And so I learned a lot just from osmosis by working there. And then I ended up moving from Florida, where I was, to Virginia. And I didn't know any of the local technology companies here. So I ended up freelancing for a friend of mine from college who was living in San Francisco. He knew a lot of companies out there who needed help. And at the time, I was getting out of PHP and into a new framework called Ruby on Rails. And so there were a lot of startups out there that were looking for Ruby on Rails developers. So I just worked on a contract basis remotely for them. And then one thing led to another, word got around. A lot of people wanted to work with me. I figured I could turn work away, or I could scale an agency. I didn't realize there was a third option, just making myself really expensive and premium. But needless to say, I went with a scale because it sounded really nice, especially thinking, well, if I could I was meeting people at conferences, at technology conferences who were Ruby on Rails developers, many of them freelancers. They hated sales and marketing, and they loved the idea of just being able to sit with their headphones on, writing code all day. And I thought, well, I was getting these referrals anyway. It made sense maybe to just kind of build this collaborative agency-ish thing. So I started doing that. And at first it was all remote, all contractors. But then over time, it quickly became a brick and mortar employed company just because I thought that would make us a little more professional. That's kind of how I stumbled, I guess, into running an agency. And again, I had no formal business training. I guess I got my training building this failed startup thing and also working in an agency. But I didn't really know much outside of knowing how to build web apps, and specifically in Ruby on Rails. And through that experience, though, was when I learned kind of, it was interesting as we grew. Mm-hmm. We had my team who was technical, for the most part. 8 of the 11 of us were billable. And then we had our clients, and I was kind of the bridge between the two. And it forced me to really see things from the client's perspective. It forced me to really think, like, why are they hiring us? I became very much salesman in chief to keep ourselves occupied. So I was doing a lot of networking and working with a lot of different people locally, specifically, who were just really better than I was at this whole sales and marketing thing. But that taught me a lot about, no one was paying us all this money for code. They wanted a solution, which sounds obvious now, but it didn't. At first, I thought we were being paid because they wanted a web app to be built, which, I mean, there's truth to that, but the web app wasn't really what they really wanted was, some improvement in their business, or for a lot of our clients, a new business to be created that was successful out the gate. So we kind of stumbled our way into becoming more and more successful, I guess, over time. But then I got to the point where, I guess, shiny object syndrome set in, and I was seeing friends of mine who had very good businesses, right, who had subscription-based businesses. Because one mistake I made with the agency is it was all transactional revenue. We had very little repeat subscription revenue at all. It was pretty much all just build a project, spend a few months building it, and then deliver it and move on.
Sure.
So I like the idea of a lot of people paying us a little bit of money on a monthly basis, which is what lured me over to thinking, well, we build software for a living for other people. Why don't we do it for ourselves? So that's where PlanScope came to be. But then I realized just to make PlanScope get to the point where it could support our team of 11 would be really, really hard. So that led me to officially exit the agency and promote the head of business development to effectively run it in my stead. And then I went off in my little work at home bubble to build and sell PlanScope on my own.
So, I mean, what was that decision? I mean, that must have been a really tough decision to do, to walk away from the established client base. And like, obviously, if you were essentially the salesman in chief, right? Like, you had all those relationships, right? So what was your thought process in doing that, and how did you unpack it?
So 2 things. One of which was, I thought, well, this is kind of an asset. I did a lot of, because I did bootstrap PlanScope while running the agency. So that meant I had to figure out, and we'd already kind of done that in a way, where I had to figure out how could I make it so I wasn't a day-to-day dependency. Because the big thing was, a big part of my job was leaving and going and traveling to, as I called it, make the rounds. So I'd go out to the Bay Area or go to different kind of pockets our clients lived at. And I would go and just go there for a week and hang out there. Or I'd go to conferences. That was a really good way of drumming up project leads for us. Or not project leads, but more like the connections that would lead to referrals or ultimately project leads. So I was out of the office a lot, which meant we had to have the right processes internally to make it so we could actually get work done and sell and close clients and everything else. So there'd already been a lot of work, as Derek Sivers puts it, making the business franchisable. A lot of that had already been done. And then that allowed me to do 2 things, one of which was build PlanScope. The other thing was when I realized I had to focus solely on the SaaS to make it so, at least for about a year and a half, we did still get inbound work that closed. And I didn't want to have the overhead of a 6-figure payroll for a business that I wasn't day-to-day involved with. So what I ended up doing, which was a very difficult decision. I ended up converting everyone to basically, it sounds okay. I basically fired everyone, but I made them all for first kind of all the work we'd get in, we'd prefer give our existing team preference. And we would basically be lead gen for them. And a few of them actually wanted to become at least freelancers, or, one of them wanted to actually start building his own online businesses that were not a service product businesses. And one of them did, Churnbuster by Andrew Culver. He used to work for me, and now he's built this great company that was sold for a bunch of money recently. So needless to say, that was kind of what we ended up doing. Was I made everyone independent contractors, so there wasn't any fixed overhead, and that allowed me to then focus on plan scope without stressing over ensuring that all the systems were running as necessary to make more in revenue than we were spending in payroll. So,
and a lot of the freelancers that I talk to, they've been in the game for a while. So they've either been doing it for 5, 6, 7 years, and they're they're kind of like at a tipping point. Do I grow an agency? Do I hire people? Do I want to branch off and do products? Do I, where am I going? Or am I just staying put and doing what I do? And to hear you work through those problems, it's enlightening to hear that you had that agency and you felt a weight on you of responsibility that, okay, there's all these people here that I'm essentially responsible for. I don't know if this is for me, right? It's kind of where it kind of boils down to, right?
I could have we had created brand collateral. I could have kept going and making this thing more successful, more well-known, more stable. In retrospect, there's a lot I would have done to accelerate that, namely getting away from fully transactional. Because the issue was, even though we ended up with a pretty decent pipeline of booked future work, the fact of the matter still remained that we had $100,000 a month overhead in payroll plus office overhead. And that meant we had to bring in more than that every month in project work. Now, it's fine when you have, say, a few month runway of future work, but you're still always kind of in that, I need to find that next, $150,000 project, and I need to find it soon. That's always kind of, top of mind, right? And considering how big our clients were, we didn't work with a lot of clients at once. It was usually 3, maybe 4, but usually 3 clients at any given time, which meant if one of them decided to drop, we had one who just ran out of funding and didn't tell us, and then they ended up defaulting on 6 figures of invoices. There's a lot of unnecessary and undue stress that can come with that. So, in retrospect, I would have looked for how can I have more clients who pay monthly and create systems that make it so, it's hard when you're building web applications. It's really hard to find a model that works with that formula, but I would have looked for that. And especially if I were starting over today, I would have wanted to find something like that. Just basically the same business model as SaaS, just more manually fulfilled with probably a 0 or more added to the monthly price tag. So,
sure. So, fast forward to today, right? You've kind of run the gamut, right? You've built your own, you did freelancing on the side, you built an agency, you left the agency life to build a product, then you helping other freelancers, being a coach, a virtual mentor, virtual coach, doing all of those courses on W freelancing and all of that. Now you're back into the SaaS realm. But if I connect the dots throughout that whole journey, there's one thing that always remains. And that's why I kind of feel like Right Message, that to me seems like the perfect fit for you because of everything that you've kind of gone through that journey. You've analyze your clients, you talk to your clients, you figure out what their problems are, you know that they need a solution, not just lines of code on a screen. They're coming to you for basically solving a problem that they have right now, the biggest pain point that they have, and being able to essentially show them that you have that solution, right? And Right Message being able to essentially take your, not just your clients, but your prospects list data store, and using that data that you've collected from your prospect list, you're essentially turning all of your other material into that right message for the right client at the right time, right? So that to me, and it could be, like you said, it could have been just a byproduct of the drip course, right? Saying like, okay, I just, I don't know how to write this JavaScript code, right? Like, I mean, I've been writing the JavaScript code for a long time too. And it is what it is. And it's, as you do it, you're just like, oh, this is easy enough to just, throw up a function and put it in there. But there are a lot of people that don't know how to do this, but they know that they can't just sit on their laurels and just broadcast weekly and do a, Jeff Walker style launch anymore. And like all of these things, they have to be a little bit more smart about their messaging and their marketing and really understand that. And can you kind of unpack like, hey, look, these people are asking me at the moment of deciding to build right message, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have the evidence behind you already that this stuff works, right? Like, yeah. I mean, you're living proof of it. But at the point at which you were getting all the feedback from the drip students and them saying, look, I just don't know how to do this. What was the point at which you said, you know what, I'm just going to build the platform so that they can do it themselves without having to get into the code, rather than saying, you know what, I'll build another premium course on top of that, right? Because I mean, it could have easily been just another premium course to say, here, 1, 2, 3 is on how to implement these functions.
Okay, so let me unpack this in a few ways. 2 things I want to focus on. One of which is, I'll call it personal validation, which is the concept. Where did that come from? How did I learn this stuff and everything else? But the second is the external validation. How did we get to the point of saying, I'm going to start a business, hire people, raise money and all that stuff to build this new thing? So the first one, on the first end, I already talked briefly about how that first venture right out of college, that failed venture, of realizing, well, Lending Tree sells leads for a few dollars, but they sell these same leads to hundreds of people, hundreds of mortgage brokers who all offer the same product. And the mortgage brokers that we got as clients were willing to pay a lot more money for an individual lead, somebody who is already recognizes them. So when they call and they say, hey, this is Jason Resnick, they're like, oh yeah, I just saw your picture when I filled out that lead form, right? So that was one thing. But I guess for me, at least, when I got into consulting, especially when I got into running an agency and I became more of a salesperson than anything else, I got pretty decent at high touch sales. So, the idea of high touch sales is extremely personalized, right? If you're gonna meet somebody at, say, a networking event, and you're meeting with somebody who quickly turns into a prospect, you're gonna tailor what it is you do to fit what you're hearing from them, right? So you're responding to them. So I got good at that. And then when I got into PlanScope, the issue was it became low touch sales, which was great. I love that. I love the idea of some guy I don't know shows up on the website while I'm asleep, plugs in their credit card, buys, and then boom, done, right? The issue is with low touch sales, you need to get really good at a few different things, namely persuasion, copywriting, segmentation, which a lot of people don't do, I think, because a lot of people look at low touch sales as kind of being a broadcast thing, right? So like, I need how do I make this that appeals to the majority of people? But then some people will go a step further and say, well, this is hard, so I'm going to go all in on a niche. I'm going to say, this is double your web design studio's rate, and that's the product, that's the website, that's the focus. This is the type of person, this is the positioning, the hard-coded positioning that we're taking both on the product and on the marketing side. So the sales pages, the site, everything else is hard-coded, positioned towards, say, web design companies. And then the product we make is the same thing. What I realized, though, was in retrospect, looking back at my high touch days where I was selling consulting, we offered the same product, basically people writing code, but we positioned it differently based on who we were speaking to. So the startup founder, we're going to describe what we do and why we do it better, differently than we would to the SMB down the street who wants to replace a really complicated Excel workflow with something with an internal app. So it's the same. We're writing code. We're doing design and UX stuff for both, but the way we describe what we're doing is different. What I realized though was on most online businesses, including my own, PlanScope, we're trying to say the same thing to everyone because we just figured, well, that's just how it is, right? If you don't want to do high touch sales, you need to just find a way to make your marketing site just appeal to as many people as possible. And the issue there is that's like saying when I used to go to I'm talking to, I used to go to a lot of local networking events. And you make the rounds and you talk to, let's say, a dozen people in an evening, and each person does a different thing. They each have, a different level of awareness about the kind of, business model that you have as I used to go to, these events and say, when I went to the first one, I remember saying, I run a Ruby on Rails development shop. What does that mean to anybody outside of that industry? Now, if I'm at RubyConf, yeah, sure, I'll say that. Right? Because that's contextually relevant and, there. So I started seeing, high touch sales works really well. And I think it works really well because it's hyper personalized, it's conversational. Whereas low touch sales tends to be more like a brochure, right? So, that's what a lot of marketing sites are, effectively brochure sites. And a lot of web designers even call it that, right? And brochures are not individualized. They're, the brochure you get at at the hotel describing all the different stuff around, right? So what I wanted to do was, putting my engineer/marketer hat on, was thinking, well, why does high touch sales work really well? Why does phone sales work really well? When I had one of my first things when I was actually before college, between high school and college, I worked for about 2 days at a phone sales boiler room type place where people would call in thinking they want a free vacation. And we would read off a script, and then inevitably no one would buy. They'd still have doubts or questions. So we would raise our hands, and then somebody called the closer would come over, and they would basically, their job is to only say, okay, you've heard the whole spiel. I'm now going to convince you, right? So that was the whole model. And my thinking was, well, the high touch stuff, I get why the closer works, because they're asking, when was the last time you went on a vacation? Or, what would it mean for your family to do this and so on? Where I'm just rambling off on the script about all the features and details and everything else, trying to, this is the company proof script that they gave us all. And I realized that the closers are the ones who closed. And the reason for that was because they took into account who they were speaking to and asked some questions and so on. So I thought, well, what if we could do the same at scale and automatically? So, we can't scale one-on-one conversations, but we could do something like look at where they came from. Did they come from a web design blog that sent traffic to an article of mine? If so, I can probably assume that this is a web designer looking at the site. And then if they start reading articles on my website about proposals, and they're reading, the majority of stuff they're reading is about proposals, well, I can probably assume this is a web designer struggling with closing proposals. So then put two and two together. And all I need to do is say, when you see a call to action or something, speak about how this can help them close more proposals as a web designer. And that's all it was. That's the same thing. It's like if I'm at I was at a Laracon, which is for Laravel, a PHP framework. I'm there and I'm talking to people, and one person came up, I remember, and asked me to tell me more about their business. And I described my stuff to them as a technical PHP developer, right? Which is different than if I'm at MicroConf, or if I'm at Business of Software, or maybe more of a business conference. I describe my business differently to them. And we all do this. This is like the way things have always been done. But I wanted to build something, and I started building it internally, like I was saying, that would basically be able to do that automatically and at scale. So first things first is I've made the mistake before of rushing into software. So I started out actually consulting. I did about 10 consulting projects for people where I basically, before my course or any of that stuff that had proposals was a thing, I basically did that for them, right? So I would go in and sell them on the benefits, sell them on the potential, and then get them to put up a sizable amount of money. And I would do it all for them. And then I do that a few times and realize that showed me people will pay for the results that this stuff leads to. And then I wanted to think, well, I've done this a bunch for myself and for other clients now. What if I made this into a more consumable course, right? So what if I package all the know-how and information that I've learned over the years and make it a video course? And then people bought that. We had about 400 people who've bought that now. And what that taught me was people, again, want this. I've gotten a little better at that point of being able to describe why it is this stuff is important.
Sure.
Because it's a lot easier for me to do that one-on-one. It's harder to do that in a way that involves a sales page and everything else. But that was really useful for me because it showed me that people were willing to do that. But there was a roadblock, and that roadblock was the gap between I get this and I want it, and this is now benefiting me. Mm-hmm. That's really hard to cross, especially when the product you're giving them is training, because they still need to. It's one thing to teach somebody, okay, this is how you personalize your site, and here's some code that will help you do it and everything. But there's still, the gap there is big. So then the product, the right message as a product came in as the, for people who value time over money and want the results as quickly as possible without needing to screw around with going on to Upwork and finding a JavaScript developer and using this weird, code library and trying to figure out how it all works and how to make it work for you. Mm-hmm. This is a turnkey equivalent of that. That's a lot cheaper and a lot safer to implement. And so it came first with a high touch consulting, individual sales cycles, individual kind of pitching the benefits and seeing how people responded and so on, broadening that out a little more into something more that was much, a course is much easier to create than software. So that was kind of the step 2. And then step 3, the ultimate step, is the done for you, not done for you. And we're not doing, we're actually going to be offering done for you, but for the most part, done for you in the sense that you sign up, you put in some code at the footer of your site and start clicking on stuff tied to your Drip account, your ConvertKit account, whatever, and you get almost immediate results. So that's kind of like, that first part that I described was kind of the personal journey that led me to realizing there's this middle ground, this dead ground between high touch and low touch that I think we can, Amazon makes bank basically doing this, but they've got, 1,000 programmers or something working on it, probably making this accessible to smaller companies and knowing psychologically why this stuff works. So that was that first realization. I kind of tested it out over the years on my own stuff in different nuanced ways. And then I broke it out of my own experiences and did it on client projects, then on a bigger scope as a course, and then now as software.
Yeah. I mean, it's a smart way to do it. I mean, I did the same thing. I released a product of WordPress development. It was just a bunch of ebooks, and I built that out only to sell a handful. Right? And I was just like, this is not the way you need to do these kind of things. You need to test things. You need to be able to validate your assumptions or pivot, right? Maybe your assumption is just slightly wrong, and maybe there's something else that you need to do. And to be able to hear you go through those steps, because a lot of people do this, especially like I was saying before, those people that are looking to maybe grow an agency or grow the software product route, or, stay as is, test it, right? Come up with a way that you could test it. I mean, I did something very similar where, myself, I'm a WooCommerce developer, right? Most of my clients are on WooCommerce, and I help them increase their conversions through custom development, integrating whatever their final 20% that WooCommerce doesn't give them out of the box kind of thing. But over the years, I've been using Drip for well over 2 years now, and I've helped them essentially implement call to actions based around customers, things like that, based out of those kind of their data bank there. But I said to myself, instead of me just doing and pigeonholing myself with WooCommerce, there's plenty of Shopify people that are using Drip. There's plenty of Magento folks that are using Drip. So I said, okay, let me see if I could kind of pull out the Drip services and offer that as a solution rather than just all in. Yeah. And it works. I mean, now I have more than half of my clients are outside of WooCommerce now at this point, just strictly on Drip services. And I was able to do that just by testing the market, talking with other folks, even just jumping into conversations on Twitter that folks are struggling with Drip. Right?
Do most of your clients are they already using Drip, or do you convert them over to Drip?
I'd say 3/4 of them are using Drip.
Okay. Because it could be, another, if you want to even go further, then you're saying, well, we could branch out to Active Campaign and, ConvertKit or whatever else. And then, you start to have all these different things where you're basically, you're like a personified extreme Zapier type thing, right? That's a funny way to, but that's the thing is that you could have, a lot of people would say, Jason, you should just go all in on one email marketing app and all in on one platform. And that's fine. I get especially from the polish of the service you offer perspective. But that being said, I think there's a lot of potential for, niching them. If you think about it, one thing I like to say a lot is, let's say you're just Jason, the automation call to action guy, right? And then somebody who happens to be using WooCommerce and who happens to be on Drip comes to you and you meet with them a few times or whatever else. And then you issue a proposal. That proposal is going to be all about Drip and all about WooCommerce. So if you think about it, niching is just really taking what already happens in a high-touch proposal and front-loading it into your marketing. And there's no reason why you can't, none of us have ever written the same proposal infinitely, to everyone. It's always slightly different. So if you think about a proposal as being a personalized sales letter, it should be, why not do that kind of on the fly in that scale? Your web browser doesn't really care if you're getting a personalized Facebook feed or a bakery's static homepage. It's all HTML at the end of the day for the browser, right? So it's kind of the same thing, and that's what we're saying is that conversationally you would do this. So if you were engaging in a sales thing with a potential client, you would do this. So why not do this again at in a way that's a little more automated? So yeah, I think, regardless of what you use, I think it's just important to start thinking through whether you're using one-off landing pages or whether you're doing pro tip could be, say you go to a conference and you meet three people, one of which owns a SaaS, one of which owns a e-commerce company, and the other owns a services business. When you follow up with them later, you send the services person, yourwebsite.com/services. Or the e-commerce, yourwebsite.com/e-commerce, and then SaaS, yourwebsite.com/SaaS. And you just find a way to say, well, how do I speak a little differently? What's a better way of explaining what I do to a SaaS company versus an e-commerce company versus a services company, right? And that's in a way doing what we're talking about, just in a, it's the kind of thing that people want to buy the thing made just for them. So yes, you're a consultant, you're a freelancer, you make a living doing one-off things for the most part, right? You're taking your talent, your skills, and you're applying it to a problem and fixing it. But marketing wise, I think there's a lot we could be doing, and especially if we just start thinking through okay, how do we, what role does our online stuff have in either acquiring or nurturing potential clients? And it doesn't matter if you're selling services or you're selling software or whatever. Same rules apply. But what role does this page have? What role does this site have? And start thinking through how can I systematically, and again at scale, start to do interesting things depending on who somebody might be and how do I then segment automatically so I can determine, is Jason this or that, right? And that's I know you do a lot of this, and this is where things get really fun, from my perspective.
Yeah, again, I'm a data geek like yourself, and just to be able to see that somebody either clicked on a question or a certain link and identified themselves, like you were saying earlier about if somebody's looking at a number of different proposal articles on your site, then that's right. What they're interested in, right? And to simply just change the call to action on a button, and it could even be just the consultation button, right? Even if it's not, a download or anything like that, instead of, book a consultation with me now, you could say, hey, let's talk about proposal writing, or, right? Just a simple text change on a site. And that's why it's funny that just to be able to translate that high touch sales one-on-one conversations that you have at scale with a tool like Right Message, can help marketing and ultimately help your conversions, right? Because that's what everybody wants, is the higher conversions. And when people, it's funny when people come during that sales conversation, they're like, well, what kind of conversions should I expect? I said, well, there's plenty of different variables in that whole question. But, if it's personalized, you're going to see a lot more than if it's, download my thing now, right? This is something that I know that you're a big proponent of, and pushing the personalizations, even just self-identifying simple things, like even your demographics. Like, I have one client that they're a texting service, right? And he knows, like, if they're in the Northeast or the Southwest, right? So like he knows that we've basically built in these kind of automations that if there's a weather alert in one of these regions, they send out an email to those clients, right? To be able to say, hey, look, there's a hurricane coming. It's in the Caribbean, Florida. You got to be aware. Do you have your email, your broadcast text messages set up, right? So just to be able to do some of those little smart automations just around the simplest things as location, goes a long way into having you stand out amongst the crowd.
Absolutely.
So this has been great. I know that we've gone a little bit over. Before I let you go, I know you're in automation and all that stuff. If you could have just one process in your business to be automated, which one would that be?
Okay, so I kind of have this, and it's the thing that I don't want to ever give up. It's the thing that actually I continue to invest time in refining. And that is what I've done is I have a system where I have a primary call to action that most people who show up on my site organically end up opting into. Or it's a thing that if you show up organically, this is the thing that you end up on at some point. And so that's the primary call to action. And then it's an email course, 9-lesson email course, which culminates with an evergreen, basically launch window for people going through that. And I've done a lot of testing. At first, it was just very basic, like 9 emails followed by a linear, here's cart open, some, convincing emails, and then cart close. But I've gone further and I've made it so throughout the email course itself, I'm getting segmentation data about who somebody is, their income range, what they're hoping to do as a result of learning this stuff, why they joined. And then I have this bridge that basically looks at their engagement, and then it'll tailor this kind of elastic sequence based off of how engaged they are. So if they're super engaged, they go sooner into the open cart. Otherwise, they're kind of sent more educational stuff over time to kind of, nurture them. And then the sale window will open up, and I take everything I know about why did they join? So what motivation do they have? What led them to the free thing? And that's how then I position the premium product based off that. What kind of business do they run? I'm going to show case studies, testimonials, language that reflects that kind of business. Where are they, what are they planning on doing as a result of this? I reuse that data that I've already collected, and I basically throw it back at them, in a way of saying, your next step is X. Here's how this product can help you basically implement X, ... And I even do things like in the final lesson, I say, are you ready to implement what you've just learned in this free email course? They click yes. I write a timestamp on their record when they clicked yes. So then during the pitch later on, about a week or so later, they get an email saying, on December 1st at 5:32 your time, you told me that you were ready to do this. I'm going to hold you accountable. And here's what you need to be doing next. Blah, 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 blah. So it's just all these different things. And then the sales page they link to buy off of is also personalized. This sequence alone is the thing that I focus all of my energy into getting people into. So whether that's through organic stuff or paid acquisition, or if I do a guest post somewhere, that's what I want people going into. Because this sequence reliably and systematically prints money each and every week during the fully automated open cart, closed cart, countdown timers, all this stuff fully personalized based off of their own time zone. So if they're in Sydney, Australia, their launch is at 10 a.m. local time, and same as if somebody in New York goes through it. So this is the thing that it's allowed me to basically build right message and not need to worry about, the hit that would have been there had I basically haven't touched DYF in 7 months now, but it's still income wise is better than it's ever been with zero input, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't give that up.
I wouldn't either. Well, this has been great. I thank you for your generosity and your time. Where can folks reach out and say thanks?
So best place would be on Twitter, Brennan Dunn, BRENNANDUNN. And then again, I'm at doubleyourfreelancing.com and writemessage.com now.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks, Brennan, and everybody else. It's your time to live in the feast.